Look, a new camera for Christmas. Did you get a new camera for Christmas? I got a new camera for Christmas. Did you get a new camera for Christmas? Yay, new camera for Christmas. What do I do now? What's up, photography world? If you got a brand new camera for Christmas and you're wondering, how the heck do I use this thing? Where in the heck do I get started? I want to learn to take pictures, but I'm so overwhelmed. Can I just learn really fast right now so I can go start having some fun? And the answer is yes. And that's what this video is going to be about. I'm going to show you the 5 steps that you need to start today before your Christmas vacation is over in order to be up and running as a photographer as fast as possible before you get too busy and never want to pick up your camera again because you're so overwhelmed by it and intimidated by it. Take advantage of your excitement. Do these 5 things and become a hobby photographer the rest of your life. Let's learn how to use it as fast as possible by doing the things in this video, and we'll have some fun. And then also make sure you like and subscribe to this channel so that you can keep continuing to learn more awesome things about photography as you grow. So photography is an awesome hobby, right? It's a lot of fun. It's a super easy way to be creative. You can document your life, get wonderful pictures of people that matter to you, friends, family, all that good stuff. You can create artwork for your house. Maybe you can even get really good at it and make a little bit of money. Photography is awesome, but most people quit for 2 reasons. And the first is that they get overwhelmed by their camera and then they're intimidated and they never want to use it. And the second is they never learn to actually do anything with the images and enjoy their images. So the first thing you need to do now that you got a new camera for Christmas is to learn this tool as fast as possible, and I'm going to give you some tips on how. So the first tip is to get out your manual from the box, and you're going to think I'm going to say read the whole thing. Nope, I'm going to say take that manual, throw it away. Alright, so why would you throw away the manual? Now the reason why I'm telling you to do that is not because it's not important to know your camera inside and out, but digging through the manual, it's kind of boring, it's kind of intimidating, and sometimes it makes it harder for people. Now if you're a manual reading type person, definitely dig in, read the manual, it will help, but there's a faster way to learn your camera, and that's why what I'm suggesting for you, because the whole point of this is to get up and running as fast as possible so that you can enjoy photography before you become intimidated and give up. The best way to learn your camera, look at every button on here, mess with it and see what it does, and see if you can figure out, okay, what does AF on mean? And then you push it. What does the camera do when I push AF on? And then maybe you'll figure it out. And then if you cannot figure it out from touching the button and messing with the button, trying to figure out what it does, then look it up in the manual or just go on Google real quick and say, what does AF on mean? And learn as you go. This is called just-in-time learning, that your brain is actually much more wired to learn much faster when you're answering questions and solving a problem that you've shown it than trying to do anticipatory learning. So if you were to read the manual, you're just throwing a whole bunch of information in your brain that's saying you're going to need to know this stuff later, but it doesn't really make any sense to you because you haven't played with your camera yet. So when I get a new camera, that's what I do. I literally mess with every button and try to figure out what it does and what it means. And then if I can't figure it out on my own, then I look it up. And then my brain will learn it instantly because I am giving it an answer to a question that it wants, and I have the experience of having the camera in my hands in front of me, so that knowledge will stick. So step number 1, play with that camera as much as possible. Mess with every button. Spend a whole day literally trying to go through the whole menu. Try everything that you can. Throw the manual away and play like crazy. The second thing you need to do is the hardest part. Okay, so the hardest thing about photography is understanding the exposure triangle. Now it's really not that hard. Once you dig in and start learning about it and get a little bit of practice, you'll be good at it in no time. It's like second nature for anybody who's been a photographer more than a little while. It becomes easy eventually. But in the very beginning, it's confusing because there's 3 moving parts that can add or subtract from each other, and they have side effects, and so you have to learn what they all do and what all the side effects are. And if you're using automatic modes, it can get even more confusing because you think you're doing something, then the camera's doing something else, and it's like so hard to learn. And I'm going to give you the big basic overview of how to quickly learn the basics of the exposure triangle. Now when you're ready, you can really dig in and learn about the exposure triangle in depth. You could spend a little bit of time on YouTube learning about ISO, shutter speed, and aperture if you really want to understand them. In this video though, I'm going to give you just the super high level basic understanding of it so that you can get started and get your feet wet with your camera, and I'm going to teach you the fastest way to try to learn it on your own, and then you can spend some extra time going through YouTube or the manual or whatever to try to get really good at it. So what the exposure triangle is, basically there are 3 settings that affect how your pictures look. 3 main settings. And they all affect the brightness, which is your exposure. The exposure represents how much of that picture is exposed, how bright it or how dark it's going to be. So these 3 settings affect the brightness, and they all have a side effect. So the first thing to do is learn how those settings affect the brightness independently, and then learn what their side effects are. And then once you have that, you could do any combination of the 3 that you want, and you're going to get the type of picture that you want. So ISO, aperture, shutter speed are the 3 settings for the exposure triangle. They all affect brightness, and they all have a side effect. So the first one, ISO, is how sensitive your sensor is. Back in the day when you used film, If you used ISO 100 film, it's a very low sensitivity. That's what you would use on a bright sunny day. And then if you're inside, you'd use ISO 1600 or 2000, and that would be super sensitive film so that you can get a bright picture while you're indoors. And it's the same thing with digital cameras. The sensor, it will increase the amount of sensitivity that the sensor has. The lower the number, ISO 100 is not very sensitive, so you're going to get dark pictures. ISO higher numbers like 1600, 2000, 3200, you're going to get much brighter pictures. So the quickest, easiest way to change your brightness is to move the ISO up or down. And then the side effect of ISO is quality. The less sensitive your sensor, the higher quality essentially. So just the way I remember that is more sensitive sensor is going to allow more noise and crap to ruin the picture. The second setting is shutter speed. That's how fast the picture is taken. The faster you take a picture, the less time light has to get in the camera. So a super fast shutter, very little light, it's going to be dark. A slow shutter, nice and open for a long time, it's going to be very bright. Lots of light comes in. Okay, so shutter speed, fast shutter speeds will be darker. Slower shutter speeds will be brighter. Now what gets confusing about shutter speed and aperture are all the numbers. So that's where you might want to dig in and spend a little time studying. But a shutter speed is a fraction of a second. So 1/100th is kind of fast, but 1/1000th is way faster, right? It's a much smaller fraction of a second. Now what's the side effect of shutter speed? Well, if you allow your camera to take a picture for a long time, the shutter is open for a while, you can move. And that picture, the light can move around the sensor as the shutter is open. So you're going to get what's called motion blur. So the side effect of shutter speed is motion blur. Super fast, no time to get blurry. So if you want crisp, sharp photos, or if you're taking a photo of your toddler running through a room or a bird flying in the sky, you want fast shutter speeds so that there's no time for blur. So shutter speed, fast shutter speed makes your photos darker, slow shutter speeds makes them brighter, and then the side effect is motion blur. The third setting for exposure triangle is aperture. Aperture is the hole in the back of the lens that the light goes through. That hole can get bigger or smaller. Bigger the hole, more light comes through. Smaller the hole, less light comes through. Brightness is affected by the size of the hole of the aperture. The only thing that gets confusing with aperture is the numbers and trying to remember what number means it's a bigger hole and what number means it's smaller. So just study the chart a little bit. F1.8 would be wide open, so the smaller numbers are actually a bigger hole. And again, it's because of it's a fraction. So 1 divided by 1 is almost full, where 1 divided by 22 is going to be smaller. So that's the reason why the numbers are all weird. So F22 is going to be super tiny, barely any light comes in. F1.8 is going to be super big, lots of light comes in. So aperture, size of the hole in the lens, it affects brightness by allowing more light in or less light in. Now, what's the side effect for aperture? Now, with the optics of focusing on the bigger or larger hole and everything else, it's going to affect depth of field blur. So the really cool thing about professional cameras versus like a phone is that you're going to get shallow depth of field abilities with an SLR mirrorless camera with a good lens and a low aperture. So the way I like to think about it is a big hole, it's less precise, and a tiny hole, it's really precise. So the more precise it is, the more sharp everything's going to be. I don't know, it's kind of a way to remember it. The camera I'm using right now is f2.8, so it's a little bit blurry behind me, but not super blurry. If I were to get up close with like a 1.4, I could get the background super blurry. All right, so that's the quick rundown of the exposure triangle. You might still be confused because it's kind of a lot of different settings all at once. The confusing part is remembering what number is what. So if you just play around, you'll learn it. You can spend some time studying that separately. There's lots of great videos. But what I'm trying to do is help you learn it fast. So here's the best way to learn the exposure triangle as fast as possible. Switch to manual mode, where it's the M on your camera. And manual actually is easier to learn than the other settings. Here's a big secret. Manual is actually easier to learn than the other settings. And the reason is you're controlling the variables yourself, and the camera's not doing anything for you. When you do automatic modes, it gets really confusing because you change things and the camera changes things, so it's hard to keep track of what the heck's going on. So as like a scientific point of view of learning, you want to be in manual. Now, I will tell you when to go in the automatic modes. When you actually want to perform and get a picture and you're afraid you're going to screw it up, use an auto mode while you're learning. But when you're learning, to learn, use manual, okay? So what are you going to do to learn the exposure triangle as fast as possible? Switch to manual mode and choose one setting a day. It doesn't have to, or for a period of time. If you're a super learner, maybe it's one setting for an hour, but one setting at a time, and say, I will be ISO only. It's the only thing I'm going to change. Everything else is going to stay the same, and I'm going to take a bunch of pictures in a bunch of different scenarios as possible until I get a really good handle of what ISO is and what it does. So move the ISO up, move it down, see how your picture changes. What's awesome about digital cameras, digital SLRs, if you got a mirrorless with an electronic viewfinder, you can see instantly what the setting does. You can learn in 2 minutes because of that. Now, if you got a digital camera, SLR style camera, then you'll have to take the pictures and then look at them at the back of the screen or look at them later, and you can still learn pretty darn fast. So there's 4 scenarios you need to do each one of these settings in: light, dark, fast, and slow. So think light, dark, fast, slow, because those are the 4 different exposure environments that'll affect your pictures differently. So if you can figure out what settings you need for those 4 scenarios, you're golden. So start with ISO only. Go outside where it's bright. Change the ISO until you get a picture. Go inside where it's dark. Change the ISO until you get a good picture. Chase your kids. Change the ISO until you think you get a good picture, and then do still life and get your ISO until you get a good picture. Now, you still might struggle a little bit because you don't know the other two, and you might still end up having problems that you don't know how to solve yet, but that's okay. By the time you practice each one at a time, you'll go back and practice all three together, and you'll be a ninja. So do ISO all by itself, then do the shutter all by itself, do fast shutter speeds, slow shutter speeds, in between shutter speeds, super fast shutter speeds, super slow shutter speeds. See how it affects the two things, brightness and side effects. That's what you want to pay attention to. So, change the shutter speed, my camera is getting darker. Change the shutter speed, my camera is getting brighter. Great. You're going to kind of memorize it by playing with it, okay? Play all day, play like cray. You're going to learn fast, okay? Just play one thing at a time so your brain can keep track of what you are doing. And then you can use Google to problem solve. If you're stuck on something that you can't figure out on your own, you'll learn it so much faster if you Google it later. So, I'm just playing with manual mode, and I'm learning what the settings do, but I kind of want to take a couple of pictures that don't suck. So the next thing to do is photograph with a crutch, right? You've been practicing all day, changing one setting at a time, and you're getting good feeling what each one does, but your daughter, your son, your dog, whatever is being super cute right now, and I just got to get a good picture and I can't screw it up, then you could photograph with a crutch. And so the good crutches are, there's an S mode or TV mode, depending on your camera, which stands for shutter, and then there's A mode for aperture, and then P mode for program mode. And those are semi-automatic modes, meaning they'll let you change one setting, and the camera's going to guess which other two are needed to make that exposure work. The cameras nowadays are great at guessing how to get your exposure right. So if you're in a pinch and you want to get good photos, use the crutches. Best one to use, aperture mode, because it's hard to screw up a photo with aperture. Just go ahead, pick one, let the camera do the rest so that you can get that picture without having to worry too much. Just can start enjoying your photography. There's no shame in it, but definitely take some time to mess around in manual mode so that you can see what each setting does. Try to get them all to work together, or switch to one of those crutch modes where you change one setting and get really good at understanding what that one setting does while letting the camera make sure that you still get a decent picture. Keep playing. You're not going to be an expert immediately, but you want to get as good as you can, as fast as you can, so that you'll keep shooting and you can enjoy photography and stick with it. All right, now what? I'm getting good at the camera. I'm playing. What's next? The next reason why people quit photography and don't stick with it and don't enjoy it is because they get overwhelmed with pictures and lose motivation. So the first thing you need to do is to get a system for what you're going to do with your pictures. Because if you do that, you won't get overwhelmed, and then you'll be more likely to stick with it. You'll actually be able to remember where the heck you put all the photos that you took and things like that. So a super simple system is fine. What I recommend is I have an import folder or an import hard drive, separate hard drive, where I dump everything into, and I always dump them in by year, and then folder from each shoot or each memory card. So for personal photos, I just literally have 2020 import, and then every folder gets off the card and it's got the file names on it so that I can tell if I already downloaded a card before. Then I copy the favorites from each one of the downloads. I'll make a separate drive. You can call it your keepers drive, and I always have one for every year so that I don't get overwhelmed by the millions of photos. I know everything from 2019 is already done and organized. It's good, so I only have to worry about the new photos from 2020. And the other advantage of having two separate hard drives and two separate folders is you might do a shoot and take 500 pictures and only like 5 of them, and you don't need to keep hard drives full of thousands of pictures that you're never going to want to look at. So the import hard drive lets you have one place where you download every picture, and it's nice and safe, and back it up. You should always back up all your folders as well, by the way. But then when you go through those folders and copy your favorites to your keepers drive, you don't need to store as many on the keepers. And then at the end of every year, you can delete some of your old import folders because you already know you've took the best out and put them on a new hard drive of your keepers. Or with storage being so cheap, you could just keep letting hard drives pile up and never have to delete. But by having a keepers and import separate, it gets a lot easier and safer to delete all those large, huge amounts of originals without having to worry about. Next thing to do is you want to start sharing or finding a way that you would like to share. Now, not everybody wants to share stuff publicly, but you want to do something with your photos to enjoy them. So whether you're sharing them with friends and family, putting them on social media, making an Instagram page, making a personal blog, making a photo book, do something that will allow you to actually enjoy your pictures, because you will lose motivation if you never look at them. So sometimes I don't even take pictures because I never get around to looking at them or doing anything with them, and that kills it for me because I love personal photos of my family, kids, and things like that. So learn to share, figure out a way that you're going to use the photos you'll actually enjoy photography, and you'll keep doing it. The best way to enjoy your photos is to print. So if you don't want to share publicly, especially, I would say your end goal before Christmas break is over and you go back to work is you have to print one photo. Whatever your best photo was of the whole vacation of playing with your camera, doesn't matter how good it is, just pick your favorite photo and print it, because seeing your photos in print is the best way to enjoy it. It makes it feel real. It's really what the whole purpose of photography is all about. It'll teach you that there's a reward at the end of the tunnel to actually enjoy going through this process of learning all this stuff and keep carrying your camera with you everywhere and shooting all these pictures. You'll see the point of doing it when you print, and you'll keep motivated to continue shooting. So that's one of my goals for 2021 is to start printing more. I haven't printed a personal photo all year, so guess what? I took a lot less personal photos. And so I'm going to fix that this year. I'm going to start printing, and because I start printing, I'm going to start shooting more. Because I start shooting more, I get to enjoy personal photography as well as all my professional work. So there it is. You got a new camera, and you're done watching this video. Take those steps, play like crazy, get your system organized, and print a favorite photo before your Christmas break is up, and you'll be on your way to being a photographer the rest of your life and having a great hobby you'll get to enjoy, and you'll get to enrich your home with beautiful art. Good luck to you. Thanks so much for watching. Like, subscribe so that you can keep learning as you have this lifelong hobby with your brand new Christmas camera. Stick around with us so you can keep learning and get better all the time. Thanks so much for watching. Again, I'm Joshua Grasso. We'll see you in the next video.